We have a lot to cover, and I have also to give you time to present. So I saw the answers that you guys have submitted for the question from that slide. It's quite good. So I think I won't be covering up very short this time. I'll be just uploading the answers. Okay, that should be now. So we have a lot to cover. So let me go over the material. And then after that, we cover presentation. I thought everyone would be on site today because you have to present. I don't know. I just turned it on just in case, but I see some students on Zoom. I don't know how you students will try to present, but let's see. I repeat. Okay, so let's go very quickly. Probably familiar with some of the materials covered today from maybe from accounting class or from other finance classes. Okay. So let's go over it. So financial analysis technique, and today we will be focusing on the profitability analysis. So before we saw like ROE and ROA, maybe in the first time, using this like ROE, it conducts the most commonly used metrics used by managers and investors from this ROE. And we know this ROE is related to the net income and the average stockholder equity. So it's net income divided by average stockholder equity. But as you can see from this formula, this ROE measures the return from the perspective of companies shareholders, okay? Because the equity is in the denominator. So today we will get to see what are the drivers of this ROE and whether this trend can be sustained. So we can see whether this trend will persist. Okay. So just simply look at how we calculate. We use a company named Boston Scientific. Okay, please sit down. All right. Please give it a count, please. Okay. Okay, so we are going to use this Boston Scientific, which is a like medical equipment company. So it's one of the S&P 500 companies. Okay. So in order to calculate ROE, we need account from income statement as well as the account from the balance sheet. So we just simply plug in the numbers and we can see if ROE is about 21%. And as we know, just saying 21%, we cannot really infer a lot from it. So in order to analyze this number, we have to compare it to some benchmark, right? So usually like an industry competitor, or also we can compare it to this S&P 500. So which has ranged from 13.5 to 13.6 between 2014 and 2018. So from this, we can see the ROE of this Boston Scientific is considered very high. So this company was very profitable. So you probably know what this S&P 500 is, but just to let you know, this S&P 500 is the 500 of the largest U.S. publicly traded companies, so the listed companies. And these 500 companies together consist of about 75% of the entire U.S. stock market cap. So it's like very big companies. And these 500 companies selected based on this market cap, industry, and like whether they were properly long term, and also the trading volume as well. So in 2019, this company was ranked 97 in this list. So this Boston Scientific is considered very, very big company. Okay. So we're gonna see whether this Boston Scientific profit, what drives this Boston Scientific profitability, and whether this trend is like sustainable. So return on equity. So when we conduct this performance analysis, we try to uncover what are the drivers. the trend is over in the past year, so that we can try to make a better prediction about the future performance. So which you would need to do when you make a forecast in order to evaluate your home. And there are two methods that used to measure these drivers of ROE. The first one is the traditional DuPont analysis. Okay. So what it does is that it disaggregates this ROE into its components of its profitability, productivity, and the leverage. So that's the first method. And the second method is analyzing ROE with focus on its operation. So unlike the DuPont analysis that does not distinguish between operating and non-operating activities, this focuses on separating between operating and non-operating activities. So these two both provide very useful insight, but you can see their focus is a little bit different, which will give you diverse insight on this company's status. Okay. So we'll get to see these two as we go through the slide. Okay. So please skip it down, right? Please skip it down so other students can listen, right? Okay, and DuPont disaggregation of ROE. This is the very basic form of DuPont disaggregation. So ROE, which is net income over stockholders' equity, can be disaggregated into ROA and the financial leverage. So it shows the profitability and leverage right here. So this ROE can reflect both of this company performance, which is measured using ROA, and it also shows how its assets are financed, which we can see through looking at this financial leverage. So we can make this ROE higher by either increasing ROA or by taking on more debt. So it's higher, but remember that there's always trade-off about using debt, right? You can increase ROE by leveraging. However, you do it at a cost. You take on additional risk. So you have to keep in mind that when you take on more debt, that you have to be sure that the company can stay solvent without missing out on the interest payment, right? So if you cannot, then it's no use taking on additional debt because it's going to put company into danger, right? It may eventually go bankrupt. So you have to be very careful about this trade-off. And let's look at the first component of this ROA. So which is net income over average total assets. So unlike the ROE, this ROA measures this profitability from the perspective of the entire company. So we also call it the enterprise level view. Okay. So this return includes the profitability using net income and total company assets in the denominator. So if the company wants to earn high ROA, the company has to be profitable at the same time manage their assets. So they should try to hold the lowest level of assets possible while maintaining this net income level to earn high ROA. So analyzing this ROA encourages managers to focus on both the income statement and the balance sheet. And this, the last bullet point, was the intuition behind this DuPont framework. Because what is DuPont, which is a chemical company, okay? So they came up with this thing in 1920. Yeah, so what they realized was that most of these managers actually focused on net income only, which is the income statement item. So they try to increase profitability only by increasing net income. And they came up with this framework can see that, okay, they can actually increase ROA by managing the balance sheet item, which in this case is an asset. Okay. So that's the core of this two-prong analysis. Okay. So focus both income statement and the balance sheet item. So we can easily calculate the ROA for Boston Scientific using the numbers from their financial statement. And the ROA for this company was 8.35%. And comparing it to the median ROA for the S&P 500 of 6.1%, you can see that return is much higher than the median. So it has been doing well. And also comparing it to the previous trend between 5.2% to 6.1%, you can still see that their profitability is very, very good, well above this range. And the second component of the two-prong in computation of ROE is the financial leverage. So in this case, it is calculated as average total asset divided by average stockholders' equity. So there may be ways to measure this financial leverage, but the basic thing this metric is trying to measure is the relative use of debt of this company versus the uses of equity in order to finance for the asset. And this financial leverage can be important because this has a contractual obligation, which means if the company fails to pay interest or pay back the principal, then there will be some serious legal repercussions, which would put the company into bankruptcy. So remember that higher financial leverage would always mean that the company is taking on higher debt. So in return, the company would have to pay higher interest payments. So as I said earlier, the company has to be certain that with additional debt, the company can stay solvent. Okay? And all else being equal, higher financial leverage will increase the probability of default and can potentially put bankruptcy. So here we are looking at this SL measure here, but as I said, there are many different ways to measure financial leverage. So later on, we will get to see this something called SLEV. So, but these two still try to measure the same thing: relative use of debt versus equity. Okay. There's a different way to do it. So again, back to Boston Scientific. So their financial leverage is 2.54. Okay. So here, this is not in terms of percentages. Okay, this is just the number 2.54. But the median financial leverage was 2.66 in 2018, and it ranges between 2.46 to 2.7. So we can say that Boston Scientific scientific financial leverage falls within the around the average. Okay, so it's not too high or not too low. So as we saw that this ROE measures the return to the stockholders, but it actually measures the return to the common stockholders and measure the return to the common stockholders. So when there's a preferred stock in the company, it can create some complications. In that case, if there's a preferred stock, we have to make adjustments to the ROE. So we can either we have to adjust the numerator and also the denominator. So for the numerator, we have to subtract the dividends from this preferred stock. Okay. And for the denominator, we subtract the preferred stock from the stockholders' equity. Then we have this return on common equity. Okay. So we will measure this ROE return to the common profit. So this is how we solve this potential complications when we have this preferred stock. And there can be another complication, which can be a little bit more subtle. It's when we have this non-controlling interest. So we also have to make some adjustments to the ROE. So in this case, for the numerator, so we use the net income that's attributable to the controlling part for the company in shareholder. So this number, you can just get it from the income statement because it should say whether it's from the non-controlling interest or it's from the controlling part. Okay? And for the denominator, we have to use the equity that's attributable to the parent company's stockholders. So we don't do it now, but we will actually get to see how we can calculate this ROE when we have this non-controlling interest. Okay. So just know that this is the formula for that. And under this DuPont framework, we can aggregate this ROE into two different things. Into this profitability measure and also the productivity measure. Okay? So we have profit margin and the asset turnover. So we can disaggregate this into these because you see the sales in these two different metrics will cancel out if you multiply. Okay? So then you will have the net income over every total asset, which is ROE. Okay? So this profit margin, which is net income over sales, is what the company earns on each dollar of sales. Okay? So the company would definitely want this profit margin to be increasing and higher. So that means that the managers would have to focus on increasing its own profit margin. So which means they have to manage their pricing, their cost of sales, and also other operating expenses and so on, in order to make sure that the profit margin is high and increasing. Okay. And this asset turnover is a sale divided by total assets. So it's the sales that's generated per unit of this asset that the company has, so every total asset. Also for this one, of course, the company would want it to increase and stay high. So in order to do so, company should try to make sure that the asset level is minimal, okay, while maintaining the same sales level. So you see how it works, right? So by looking at this kind of disaggregation, managers can try to make some insight about how they should be managing sales or income or even the assets if they want to increase the profitability. So this DuPont framework, so it all starts from this ROE. Okay. So at first, it's divided into ROA and the financial leverage, and we can go in one layer deeper here by dividing this ROA into profitability and productivity. So we saw some of the measures, one measures each for the profitability and productivity, but there are actually many different measures that can be used to provide some useful insight. So first, we'll be looking at the profitability. So we already looked at profit margin, so we'll be looking at gross profit margin and the operating expense margin. So gross profit margin is gross profit divided by sales. So since this gross profit is the sales minus cost of goods sold, this is influenced both by selling price of company's product and this cost of sales. So in general, and probably like all the time, high and increasing gross profit would be preferred. Okay. Who would want this to be lower, right? They would want this to be higher and increasing over the years. And if you observe like low or decreasing gross profit margin over the years, it probably indicates something bad is happening in this further investigation. Maybe there's more competition, so maybe there's some like decreasing demand for the company's product. So these are some of the things that you can infer from this decreasing gross profit margin. So competitive intensity has increased. So in this case, the company may have to lower their selling price to try to stay competitive in the market, right? So this competition is actually an important factor that could that impacts the profitability of the firm. Or simply the product line has lost its appeal to the customer. Maybe their product is not like cutting edge anymore. So I think there was like a very well-known like company that creates like products like MP3, right? But with the introduction of like Apple, anyway, the music player, right? All these MP3 players like went obsolete and they went out of business basically. So that can happen. Or maybe the manager just failed to manage the cost of their products. So product cost would like increase, get out of the hand. Or change in product mix, maybe they sell like a low profit margin product. And lastly, it's possible that the volume has declined, so like sales volume, right? Sales volume declined. So its fixed cost would have to allocate it to smaller number of items than sold. So it would reduce the gross profit of this company. So these are the potential things that you can infer from this decreasing gross profit. And there's an operating expense margin. Okay. So it measures the operating cost for each sales dollar. It's the operating cost divided by sales, right? So consider each expense in whatever detail the company provides in its income statement. So this operating expense is the expenses that show between this gross profit and the operating income. Okay, so these are the operating expenses, like SG&A, those kind of things would fall under this operating expense category. So in order to infer some useful insight from this operating expense margin, you can compare it over time, or year over year, or against the year. But we always have to make sure that the competitors would have to be in the similar business model and also in the similar industry. So this is the S&P 500 operating expense margin over the years. So you see that it has been decreasing over the years since 2009. So the reason for this decrease here is that since this 2009 financial crisis, there has been a rise in the competition in the overall market. So they had to cut down costs, and they also had to cut down their prices, trying to survive. So that's why we see this decrease in the operating expense margin over the years. So competition is getting fierce. And next we can look at the productivity, so the turnover ratio basically. So probably the most important turnover ratio under the DuPont framework is asset turnover. Sales over asset total, average total sales. Okay. So it basically tells you like how many times this asset has been used to create this sale. Okay, so if it's higher, that means these assets are used more efficiently to create the sale. Right? And we can also create a lot of other different turnover ratio, but we have to keep in mind this natural linkage. Okay, so you will always have the income statement item on the numerator and a matching balance sheet item on the denominator. So let's look at several examples of this turnover ratio. So the working capital turnover ratio to illustrate this natural linkage. So first item is the accounts receivable turnover, which is calculated as sales from income statement divided by average accounts receivable. And next one is the inventory turnover ratio, and it's the cost of goods sold divided by average inventory. And accounts payable turnover ratio is cost of goods sold divided by average accounts payable. So you may have noticed that here the accounts receivable turnover ratio is the sales, while the other two uses the cost of goods sold, right? So it's because that for accounts receivables, these sales are reported on the balance sheet as the selling price, and it's selling price. That's why we use the sales in the numerator. But for the other two items, inventory and the accounts payable, it's reported on the balance sheet at its cost. Okay? So that's why we use the cost of goods sold. So this is what I meant by the natural linkage. Okay? So sales used because this accounts receivable is reported on the balance sheet at its selling price, correct? For the other two, it's reported at its cost. So it's naturally very closely linked together. So as long as there's some natural linkage, this turnover ratio will make sense, okay? As long as there's natural linkage. And using these three working capital turnover ratios, you can also calculate the cash conversion cycle. Okay? So which is the average number of days to buy inventory using credit, which means you buy using accounts payable, and you also sell this inventory on credit, creating accounts receivable, and collect it, and pay accounts payable. So before you can actually calculate this cash conversion cycle, you have to convert these three ratios by dividing this ratio from this 365. So now you will have this in terms of the number of days. So this is going to be the days sales outstanding, days inventory outstanding, and days payable outstanding. So the cash conversion cycle is going to be the sum of the days sales outstanding and days inventory outstanding minus days payable outstanding. So this cash conversion cycle is going to show the average number of days from purchasing inventories or manufacturing this inventory, and then sell it and collect and pay. So it's basically very similar to the operating cycle. Okay. So generally, this company would definitely prefer lower cash conversion cycle because in that case, the company would be generating this profit and the cash very quickly. So the working capital requirement for the company is going to be lower. Don't have to keep too much idle cash in hand, right? So in order to lower this cash conversion cycle, then the company would have to what? Pay slowly, right? So you pay slowly, which means this number has to be higher, and try to collect it fast, right? Have to tell your buyer, okay, you have to pay now within 30 days instead of 40, pays faster, and then you have to sell your products faster. And then you will have lower cash conversion cycle. So to analyze using this cash conversion cycle, you focus on the time trend, right? And also saying you try to compare to peers. Okay. So this is the cash conversion cycle by the industry within this S&P 500 company. You see that it differs between one industry to another, like what? So looking at the healthcare industry, for example, has a cash conversion cycle of over 100 days, which is very, very high, right? So it's because that this healthcare industry is involved with this like third parties, like the government or the insurance companies, and they tend to pay very, very slowly. So hospital, like for example, will charge the government for this money, for the money, right? For the patient after they accept this patient, government would probably pay like very, very slowly, thereby increasing the cash conversion cycle for the healthcare, this hospital. But when you look at this utilities industry, it's only like around 20 days. So it's because that this utilities companies to tend to like build like in advance sometimes, and after it gets built, it'll be paid like almost immediately. Like when you use electricity at home and you get charged, this money will be automatically deducted from your account, right? So that's why this cash conversion cycle is very low for the utilities company. So you see that like this cash conversion cycle can be like very specific to the industry. So have to make sure that you compare this cash conversion cycle to the peers that from in the same industry, right? And let's look at the cash conversion cycle for Apple here. So you see their cash conversion cycle here is actually negative number. So here you see, so this number is very, very low and even negative because this is also because Apple carries very little inventory. And in a lot of cases, Apple sells its product in advance without having actual inventory on hand. It's like this iPhone 14, for example, right? People pay in advance, but they won't deliver until the future date. And they have like very quick sale, they sell very fast, and they pay very slowly to their supplier. So that's why it results in this negative cash conversion cycle of this 73.6 days. So what it means is that this negative number means that Apple can invest their cash that it receives from their product sale and invest this money for 73.6 days before they actually need this cash to pay back to their suppliers. So it's like, so you can consider this as a very like short-term loan that does not require any interest payment. Okay. So this Apple generates their profit from making sales and use that money. It's like kind of free money and invest this cash into generate additional return. So this negative cash conversion cycle is viewed very positively. So here, the cash conversion cycle for Berg is calculated. See that it has increased a little bit, but it has actually dropped again in 2019. And it was due to the improvement in all three categories, DSO, DIO, and DPO. Okay. So you can improve using either of these three, by improving either of these three items. So let's see here. So comparing between 2017 and 2018, we see that day sales outstanding has been reduced by 2.4 days. Okay, and then we know that the sales is related to this DSO, right? Remember from the formula in the earlier slide. And we can calculate the per day sales by dividing the sales by 365. And per day sale is $115.9 million. So you can multiply this 2.4 by this per day sale, and you see this cash savings of 278.2. So that's the savings by improving 2.4 days of day sales outstanding. And for DIO and DPO, it has also improved by like 1.2 days and 1.6 days. And this time, we have to use the daily cost of goods sold, which is $37 million. So you multiply this 1.2 by 37 and 1.6 by 37, you will get the cash savings. And you sum it up, then you will get the total cash savings from improving this cash conversion cycle. So, which means that this company will have like basically extra cash of 381 that they can use to invest in the very short term, right? So trend seems very favorable for Verve in this case. But you also have to see whether these improvements are too favorable. Okay. So maybe like especially with the payable outstanding. I mean, like if you, of course, you can improve this cash conversion cycle if you ask your supplier to pay fast, or you just delay your payment until you can, right? That way you can decrease this cash conversion cycle. But you have to be careful because this short-term improvement can come at the expense of longer-term market position and the relationship with the supplier. So if you start paying late, your suppliers may think, oh, maybe this company has some issues with tax, or maybe this company is just like not so good at paying their payments on time. And if this keeps happening, it's going to ruin the supplier relationship, and it may not have very good impact in the long run. Okay, so this thing also has to be taken into account when you try to see whether this company is doing making favorable improvement or not. Okay? And we have the PPE turnover. Okay, sales over the average PPE. So this improving this PPE turnover is just not as easy as the one that we just previously saw, because it often entails this kind of thing here. First, it can require like divesting of unproductive assets, or even the entire business line. Okay, so this PPE will be reduced, right? In that case. Or you may have to like get involved in the joint ventures with another company in order to like share these assets. So you don't have to buy this PPE all by yourself, so you can share the cost, and in that way you can share the like distribution network, this IT, other facilities, and even the transportation fleets and warehouses. So that way you can minimize the increase in the average PPE. Don't have to invest as much. And you can sell your own production facility to another company, but you can at the same time sign the agreement saying that, okay, you create this product for me and sell it only to me. Okay? So that way you can get rid of this facility from your balance sheet. So the average PPE would be lower. And last one, you can sell and lease back this admin building. So you can lease the buildings instead of making purpose. So you can, as you can see, these four examples just like don't sound like that simple compared to the previous, right? So it can sometimes be like very risky thing as well. Like you sell off your like business lines, you sell your facility. It can actually be very costly if the other party says, okay, I'm not going to purchase for you anymore. Then you just do whatever you can do. So yeah, so this improving the PP turnover is just not going to be an easy thing. And the analysis of this financial leverage, last item, under this DuPont framework. So this judicial use of financial leverage benefits stockholders. It's a judicial use, but it just basically means that you can benefit from this tax shield. Okay, so you can get the deductions in the income using from paying the interest payment, taking the interest payment. So because of this tax shield, this debt is considered a relatively inexpensive source of capital. Okay. However, we know adding more debt adds more risk because this repayment is mandatory, unlike like dividend payments from the equity. So this analysis of this financial leverage would involve the level of borrowed money relative to the equity capital, which is going to be the first formula on the bottom, and the level of profit or cash flow relative to the required debt payment. The second one, the times interest earned. So these two are very commonly used metrics for the analysis of financial leverage. So the first one just basically shows how much liability you have when you compare to this total amount of equity. And the times interest earned, try to see how many times, how much money you make that's enough to pay for your interest expenses. So if your interest expense is 100 this year, but EBIT is 1,000, then your times interest earned is going to be 10, which means your earnings from the operation is enough to pay for 10 times of the interest that you need to pay this year. So let's look at this analyst adjustment or adjusted ROA. So ROA is typically under control of operating managers, but the capital structure decision, which means like whether to use debt or equity, is not at the control of this operating manager. Okay, so it's going to be from the hierarchy. So common adjustments made to the numerator ROA by adding back the after-tax net interest rate, which is net of any interest revenue or other non-operating expense revenue reported after operating income. So we can calculate the adjusted ROA using this formula, and we get 8.68. So let's see from the next slide. So we know this is ROA, net income over average asset. But this return on this asset is net income, which also includes the effect of financing decisions, which means this net income comes after paying the interest payment, right? So this is not this is something that cannot be controlled by operating managers. So we want to reduce and get rid of that effect of this financing decision. So therefore, this analyst often adjusts its ROA and exclude the effect of their financing. So what they do is on the numerator, from net income, you add this net interest expense multiplied by 1 minus tax rate. Okay? And you just divide by the average asset. So by doing so, you get rid of this effect from the financing. Okay? You add back this amount that is attributable to the financing position. So Boston Scientific has 8.68 of this adjusted ROA, while their original ROA was 8.35%. So you see that actually the difference is not so big for Boston Scientific, but it's because this company has very small net interest, but for other companies, for other cases where debt is extensively used, is adjusted ROA and just the regular ROA is going to show like quite significant difference. And treasury stock. So our company Johnson & Johnson in this case, the original ROA was 25.5%, but after they add back their treasury stock, they have 16.5% ROE. So these two bullet points are this important thing here. So for many firms, the effect of treasury stock creates two challenges to the analysis. Okay? So like a small equity balances result when stock buybacks are very large. So when the treasury stock means the company buys back their own stock, right? So reduce the stock that's outstanding. And when company repurchases its stock, this treasury stock is going to show in parentheses showing negative number. Okay? So it will reduce this equity amount in the company. So and it can even show there's a negative balance in case this treasury stock is very big. So and there's no like very easy solution when this equity is neutral or negative. So there are a few things that we can do here. Either just use normal ROA, or we compute this ROE after we add back the treasury. So let's see. So these days, like maybe past decade or so, a lot of companies have been buying back their own stock, creating a lot of treasury stock. And it will result in very small equity balances, and which would inflate their own ROE. So reduce the number of shares that's outstanding, right? So it reduces the denominator, therefore ROE is going to increase. And as I said, it can even be negative when the amount that's actually spent to buy back their stock is greater than the original contributed capital by the shareholder. In that case, their ROE is going to become negative, which does not make sense at all. So that's why we have to address this issue somehow. So as we saw in the previous page, the first way is just to use this ROA. Okay? So use return metrics that are less sensitive to low or negative equity. Or a second way is to add back their treasury stock. And this treasury stock, so stock repurchase is like often used by some of the like CEOs because their incentive is often tied to this ROE. So they try to buy back their own stock to increase ROE so they can get their incentive paid. So we'll get to see these later on, right? So far, we saw the disaggregation of ROE from the DuPont within the DuPont framework. But ROE disaggregation with this operating focus recognizes that companies create value mainly through the core operation. Okay. So here, this operating focus try to identify what are the returns from their own four factors. Okay? So this operating and non-operating items show up on both the balance sheet and also on the income statement. And this ROA that we saw from the traditional DuPont method in the earlier slide, it does not distinguish between operating assets and non-operating returns. As we saw, it only divides it into three different factors that shows productivity, profitability, and financial leverage. And it does not care whether these are from the operation or non-operating returns. So the intuition behind this operating focus is that we can improve the analysis if we can separately identify this operating and the non-operating components of this, okay, and their this return as well. So under this view, this ROE consists of two different returns: the return from the operation and return from the non-operation, not the core operation. So return from operating activities would be the return that's generated by like manufacturing and selling their product and so on. But for the non-operating return, it's going to be the return from their financing or investing activities, right? So it can be like a return that's earned from like investing in like a marketable security. Okay? So these kind of returns would fall under non-operating returns. So the financial leverage that we saw in the DuPont analysis is the ratio of total assets to the total stockholders' equity. So this under DuPont framework, this liability that they use here, this FFL, actually includes all different types of liabilities. But however, under the operating framework, these liabilities can be divided into the money that's actually borrowed from loans, bonds, mortgages, for interest, so on. And also another one would be from the operating liability, which can be generated through the operation, like accounts payable, or like other accruals, and so on. And here, these liabilities, operating liabilities, tend to be self-liquidating. Okay. So the operating focus ROE treats these two different types of liabilities differently for their ROE analysis. So first, let's look at the return on net operating assets. Okay. So these operating returns are measured by return on net operating assets. And it can be calculated as net operating profit after tax, or simply called the NOPAT, divided by average net operating assets, calculated as the average. So how it looks is pretty much similar to the regular ROA, but the difference is that we are only focusing on the profit from the operation, okay, and also focusing on the operating assets, not total assets. Okay. So this is how we can calculate using the Boston Scientific balance sheet here. So the net operating assets equal to the operating assets minus the operating liability. So these line items that are in red are its operating assets and the operating liability. So here from the current assets, it includes the accounts receivable, inventory, like prepaid income tax, and other current assets. Okay. that cash and cash equivalent not considered operating asset because most companies don't want to hold cash. Okay, so when we say cash and cash equivalent, in most cases, these amounts are cash equivalents, which are marketable securities that will come due within mature within 90 days. So it's actually kind of investment. Okay, that's why this 146 of cash and cash equivalent is not categorized as operating asset. And the current liabilities and so for the liability part, we have accounts payable and other accruals and deferred income taxes and so on. So these are considered operating liabilities. So we sum up each of these operating assets and operating liabilities, and we subtract the operating liabilities from the operating assets. Then you will get net operating assets. Okay, so that's how you get the net operating asset. And then you can also calculate the net non-operating obligation. Right? And since it says obligation, you start off from the liabilities and subtract the assets. Okay. So non-operating liabilities minus non-operating assets. So non-operating liabilities are simply the ones that's not in red. Okay, the current and the long-term debt. So these are from the financing decision, right? So these are not from its company's operation. So these are just from financing, so it's not considered operating liability. So you sum up these two items, and you subtract this non-operating asset, which is cash and cash equivalent of 146. And you get the net amount, net non-operating obligation for NNO. And let's see how we can calculate the net operating profit after tax, or no tax. So it starts off from the net operating profit before tax, okay, which is going to be sales minus the operating expenses. And you subtract the tax on your operating profit. So how you can calculate this NOPBT? So you start from revenue, and you subtract the cost of goods sold, SG&A, and all these things that you see here, then you will get this NOPBT. Okay. So this the bullet point, so this is basically the income statement in order, right? Revenue, cost of goods sold, and all the expenses. So you can see here, you start off from the sales, subtract the cost of goods sold, and subtract the operating expenses, and you will get operating income, which is here NOPBT of 1,506. And from that, you can subtract the tax on operating profit to get the NOPBT, no tax. So then, how do we get this tax on operating profit? So we start off from tax expense, and from the tax expense, you add back the tax shield. Okay? So this tax shield is calculated as pre-tax net non-operating expense multiplied by the tax rate. Okay? So this tax shield, as you know, is the amount that the company saves by having tax-deductible non-operating expenses, like interest payments, right? Interests are tax-deductible, so it reduces the amount of tax that needs to be paid. But here, for the tax on operating profit, you have to add back this amount. So, by definition, this amount of tax that's saved from this tax shield is not an operating profit. That's why we have to add it back to tax expense. So we start off from determining tax on operating profit from the pre-tax here, the pre-tax net non-operating expenses. So let's see how we can get it. So pre-tax, I think there was a typo in the previous slide here. Pre-tax net non-operating expense is the interest expense of 241 minus this other income in this case, which is going to be $85 million. Okay, so that's the pre-tax net non-operating expenses. And the income tax expense in this case is negative 249. Okay, so maybe this company has some deductions or maybe tax credits. That's why we have this tax benefit in this case. This is 249. So assuming 22% tax rate, we can start off from this NOPBT of $1,606 million, and you subtract this tax on operating profit. Okay? So you get 1,736. So this part here is the same as the formula, exactly the formula that we saw earlier, right? Tax expense plus the tax shield. Tax shield calculated as the 85 that we have calculated here, 85, multiplied by the tax rate of 22%. So you get this no tax. And this return on net operating asset. So it measures the operating return. Okay. So we already saw this net operating profit after tax divided by NOA. This is how we can measure. So let's see this using the Boston Scientific number. Somehow I noticed that this number is off by $1 million, but there's a lot of typo, but it's very small number, so you can just disregard it. Okay? It was originally 1,736, I believe. Somehow it shows the 37 here. Okay? Anyway, this RNOA is 12.37%, and when you compare to the median RNOA of S&P 500 of 11.3%, just as like ROA, we can still see that this Boston Scientific is performing very well. The return from operation is still very strong. And when you compare it to this 2014 to 2018 range, you can still see it's also on the upper range of this nearly close to 12.5%, doing very well. So this shows these figures that we have seen using both the DuPont framework and our operating focus. So here, one thing that we can recognize is that this ROA is smaller than our NOA. Here, ROA is 8.35, while our NOA is 12.37. And this is going to be true because of these two reasons. Okay? Because there is a numerator effect, which is that NOPAT is going to be greater than net income that's used for ROA. Because there is an after-tax effect of non-operating expenses for this net income, which is what $66 million difference. And then there's a denominator effect. So the average NOA is always going to be smaller than average asset. Okay? Because net operating asset does not include this operating liabilities, and the assets this normal asset would include this non-operating asset. So the denominator is always going to be smaller for our NOA. Therefore, our NOA is always going to be greater than ROA. So, using this this ROE that we have seen, this ROE of 21.24 is equal to the operating return of 12.27 plus the 8.87 non-operating return. And this 8.87 non-operating return is the effect of this non-operating liability, which is going to be from the financing decision. So it's from the financial leverage. So this financial leverage actually quantifies the risk that's associated with the use of debt. And let's see how it's different between this DuPont and operating. From DuPont, this ROE over ROA is going to be 2.54. Well, for operating, it's going to be 1.72. So this is how it's calculated. But if you inverse it, you can see that about 8 divided by about 21, which is about 40%, right? About 40% of their return is going to be from this financial leverage effect. Okay? That's under DuPont framework. But however, when you look at this operation focus, if you see it, so it's like 12 divided by 21, which is going to be maybe 50-60%, right? 60-70% is going to be from this financial leverage effect. So that's how you can try to see quantify this risk that's associated with this debt, right? And you see it's like quite different between this DuPont framework and the operating focus. And also for our NOA here, just like from the DuPont framework, we can disaggregate this into two different components. So it's going to be can be disaggregated into the net operating profit margin and the net operating asset turnover. So it's divided into a profitability and the productivity. It can be divided into these two. So this net operating profit margin, the first component, shows how much of operating profit the company earns from each of their sales dollars. So Boston Scientific, for this case, is 17.68% of NOPM. So how do we interpret this? It means for every dollar of sales made, the company earns about 18 cents of operating profit after accounting for all expenses that include tax. And net operating asset turnover, it measures the productivity of companies' net operating assets. So we can also calculate this for Boston Scientific, which is 0.7. So it means that for every unit of this operating asset, the company earns 70 cents of sales revenue. So that's how you can interpret it. And you would definitely want these two ratios to be increasing and higher, right? Because it will increase this RNOA, the return from net operating asset. So it's very important to know that what are the factors that affect this NOPM and NOAT. Okay? So NOPM, profit margin, so is affected by the level of gross profit and also the level of operating expenses and level of competition. So in order to manage this NOPM, the managers would have to focus on, just like the profit margin earlier, right? Has to focus on like the price settings and the cost of goods sold And if there's some competition, you also have to take that into account because competition is a big driving factor of firm profitability. Okay. As we know, when competition is high, the company may have to cut down on their prices or do something to stay competitive ahead of their competitors. And for NOAT, it can be increased by either increasing sales for a given level of operating assets, or reduce the amount of operating assets, which is not going to be easier, as we saw earlier, while generating the same sales or volume. Or they can reduce the operating working capital. So when you reduce this operating working capital, then this will lead to higher NOAT. So, and it's considered the easiest way among these three options here. Or as we saw, they can also use like alliances or outsource their production facilities, or they can create special purpose entities to pay this asset outside the current firm boundaries. So the denominator is going to be lower. Okay? And this second approach is the easiest, so that's what managers tend to focus on, because managing working capital does not require like too many things, such as like selling off their like assets or their operations, or trying to create some alliances with the company, which can give a lot of headache, and the process itself can take a very long time as well. So this shows the margin versus turnover here. So this big green line shows the RNOA, the median RNOA for all the entire listed companies in US in 2018. And you see that some companies have low NOPM while having high net operating asset turnover, or low net operating asset turnover while having high net operating profit margin. Right? So you see there's some utilities, electrical, or gas, all these kinds of companies on the bottom here have low net operating asset turnover, which indicates that these are very capital intensive industries. So for this kind of companies, in order to achieve like somewhere around the median RNOA, they try to increase their net operating profit margin. But for the other type of companies like automotive or apparel companies, they tend to have lower profit margins. But instead, they try to increase their net operating asset turnover, and they're eventually achieve higher than median RNOA. Okay? So this shows that there's no single strategy for a firm to achieve the return on net operating, high return on net operating assets. They can always create some mixture of this strategy. You can focus on NOPM or NOAT, trying to achieve your goal. Okay? So that's the point of this. Okay, so I try to rush because I will have you present your presentation. So let's have a very quick break, maybe 10 minutes. Okay, so you can go maybe toilet, grab something to eat, and we'll get started.
เราไปเซ็นก่อนคือเขาอยากมีเป็นทั้งหมดเลยเขาอยากได้คะแนนโอเคป่ะอาจจะไม่รู้ไม่รู้เขาให้แค่เสียงแล้วนี่คือเต็มที่แยกกันค่ะก็เลยถ้าพี่จะได้ไม่ต้องพูดเลยว่าไม่แต่ถ้าเราทำมาไก่แต่ว่าผมนี้จะลงที่ไม่ได้
What do you think? I want to hear your opinion. เราถามให้อยู่แล้วไม่ต้องกลัวเขาบอกว่าถ้าฝากแล้วจะต้องขอบคุณให้เองก็ไม่งั้นมันไม่แอคทีฟ